Hello and welcome to the Balanced Business Dad podcast. This podcast is just one part of the Balanced Business Dad movement. This movement provides a platform of the important pillars of life while building this council of dads to support each other as we work to balance our lives. The 6 pillars of life that we strive to balance are our faith, our health, our marriage, fatherhood, brotherhood, and our business. We are here to build a council of dads to celebrate wins and as well as to share the challenges of being a husband and a father, and all the while working to keep our pillars in balance. The goal of the Balanced Business Dad movement is for dads to be better in all things, balanced, because everyone in our lives deserves it.
Dads, welcome to another episode of the Balanced Business Dad. I'm your host, Dustin Hogue, and with me, as always, my friend, my business partner, my mentor in life, and my co-host on the Balanced Business Dad, Mr. RJ Campbell. RJ, how are we doing today?
We are doing great. I love every episode. I get some different title thrown out there. This is nice.
Yeah.
I like this.
That's how you know I just wing everything I'm doing. I don't remember what I said last time. I don't remember what I'm going to say next time. So that's why. But guys, we have another special guest on the episode for you today. Hope you got a ton of information out of the last one. This one I know you're going to, because I have my notepad ready. Just looking at his website, I know we're going to get a ton of tips and tricks and just how to be better in life. So guys, welcome to the episode, Mr. Michael Bauman. How are you, sir?
I am doing great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So Michael is literally halfway around the world. Is it halfway or all the way around? Yeah, because it's circles. So it'd be halfway around the world, somewhere over there in China today, because that's where you live, which is super cool. You run a company called Success Engineering. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, cool. We're going to get right into that and just kind of give us a synopsis of who you are today, and then we'll go into how you became who you are today. How's that sound?
Yeah, it sounds great. Awesome. So who I am today, I'm glad we'll get to the journey there, because it was not always like this. But yeah, I live with my family here in Hangzhou, China. We've been here for 5 years. We weathered the COVID storm, just kind of coming out of it right now. Fortunately, we'll get to see our family for the first time in 3 years this summer. So very, very much looking forward to that. But it's been a wild ride. Basically, what I do is I coach entrepreneurs around all the areas of their life that, and this is right up your guys' alley, that a lot of times we sacrificed for whatever definition of success we put out there, right? So a lot of the people I work with, it's like they reached a certain level of financial success and they realized, oh, wow, I sacrificed all these other areas of my life to get to this point and it doesn't feel like a success. And we can get into that more, whether it's the, physical aspects, their relationships, all of the very similar pillars to what you guys have. So I coach them to bring balance to the force, so to speak. Like, how can we actually bring those other areas back into balance so that we feel like a success in every area of our life?
Love that.
That's great.
So you got to know success, you have to feel it. That's awesome. So how did that come about? Because that's not something you just, go to college for and say, I'm going to do this. So that's got to be an exciting journey.
So a lot of tears, a lot of struggle, a lot of depression around that. So basically, I was, when I was in the US, I was actually a personal trainer, a nutrition coach. And I left, the corporate gym I was working for to start my own. It was my first dip into the entrepreneurial land, right? So we all leave that with the, big dreams of I'm going to make a ton of money and have a ton of time and it's going to be amazing. Well, of course, none of that happened. I was just failing miserably. Basically, at that time, my family was we were on food stamps. We found out we were pregnant with our first kid. We didn't mean to have, we weren't planning, to have a kid at that period of time. And I remember just sitting in my car, just crying. And I felt so worthless. I felt so alone. And it felt like no matter what I did, it never seemed to feel enough. And that's kind of an aspect of success. And we can get in that as well. But into this kind of dark period of my time, I stumbled across Start With Why by Simon Sinek. Mm-hmm. And there's a part in there where he goes to the gathering of the Titans at MIT. So multi-millionaire entrepreneurs. They're all kind of getting together to grow and develop. And the speaker asks everybody there, goes, how many of you have achieved your financial goals? 80% of the room put their hands up. So they probably don't have to work another day in their life. And then follows it up with how many of you feel like a success? And 80% of this room of multimillionaires actually put their hand back down. And that was kind of the genesis for everything that came after. That's why I call it success engineering. One, because we have to clearly define what success is. And two, engineering aspect is there's frameworks and there's systems that we can actually do. But I talk about there's different layers of success. The first layer is the appearance, which is everything we see on social media. It's everything that we see in our, keeping up with the Joneses kind of lifestyle. But underneath that is a feeling. How can I actually feel like a success in these different areas? So for you, it's like, how can I feel like a success with that faith that I have? For me, I talk about it in terms of like just spirituality or existentially, right? What creates meaning in my life, right? So how can I feel like a success in that area? How can I feel like a success in terms of my health, right? How can I actually feel like, my body is enough? And I found in my work with entrepreneurs and just people in general, success and feeling enough are almost so intertwined, they could be used interchangeably. Like, how can I feel enough as a father? How can I feel enough as a brother? How can I feel like I've done enough? How can I feel like I've contributed enough? How can I feel, what you can insert whatever you want into that spot, and you have that layer. But then underneath that, you have to unpack all of the identities and narratives and stories and limiting beliefs that you have, because you can't have a consistent feeling of something unless you change some of the underlying stuff. And I would say even underneath that, as a layer even deeper than that, is just the awareness of one, actually going, figuring out what's going on a day-to-day basis with ourselves. But two, is this moment that we're living in, is it enough? Like, regardless of whether we classify it as good or bad, is it enough? And, can I give the fullness of myself, my presence to whatever, you guys right now, like, is it enough that I'm doing that? And I feel like that's one of the best definitions of success for my wife, for my kids, for my life, is every person I interact with to know that I was 100% there. That would be like, oh, I would consider myself as success. So that's kind of breaking down those different layers, out of my story.
Wow. Well, I took a lot of notes there. So just to recap and make sure because I wrote these down, this might just be for me now, but guys, so pay attention. But so you started with appearance, then under that was feeling. So appearance is, how do I look successful, right? Like the car, the house, the watch, whatever it may be. Then under that, you put feeling. How do I feel successful in a certain area? So here at the Balanced Business Dad, we talk about, how do I feel like I'm successful in my faith, my health, my marriage, as a father? I love that. And then identifying. So going into that, the identity part. So that's your identity equals the success, or your identity is the enough. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So identity in the stories is a very interesting thing that you have to unpack. And this is where you start to get into, where we can actually use emotions that we feel as a signpost to get down very quickly, a lot of times, to very deep levels of who we are as people. So especially as guys, not, but as a generalization, emotions are not necessarily our jam, right? So we either like repress them, we push them away, or we like dislike them. Like there's times like with my anger with my kids, if I get frustrated at my kids, like I just don't like that part of myself, right? But what we could do with you can use any behavior you dislike or any emotion. You have to realize they are there for a reason. And the reason, a lot of times, fundamentally, is either to keep you safe or to help you survive. And this develops in our childhood with whatever we had to do. We have big traumas, we have micro traumas, but whatever we had to do to keep ourselves safe and survive. And part of surviving is receiving love from the people that are most important in our life, which is our parents. So we navigate however we need to receive love and to stay alive. And so those methods that we use are very, very important. And they are very useful. They are performing a job. But when we're 30, 40, 50, 60, plus, that is no longer serving us the way that potentially we want to do. But we can use it as a signpost for what is really going on. So my thing is, like, I would just ask the audience to go think about the top 3 areas, maybe 5 areas where you don't feel enough. Like what areas where you're like, man, I like, for me, it's like, do I feel enough as a father? Right. Like that's one, money is always kind of that one. A lot of times with guys too, like, God, do I have enough money? Am I safe enough? And do I have enough in retirement? Do I have enough in investments, whatever? But think about those three areas. Then what you need to do is you need to go, what is the positive intent behind this feeling? So what is the job that it's actually doing? And you can flip it around. There's a number of different ways that you can kind of flip it around. But and this is any behavior, it's actually a lot of times keeping you safe. So let's say with feeling enough, right? You're going like, oh, this is actually keeping me safe. But then you can ask another question to follow up and you go, if I was totally and 100% safe, what would be even more important than that? And for a lot of times, and it varies for different people, but a lot of times what comes up in that point is to be loved. Like if I was actually 100% safe, I would actually want to be loved. And you can follow that up with another question and go, if I was 100% loved, completely loved, what would be more important than that? And, a lot of times what comes up for people is, oh, if I was actually if I felt 100% loved, then what would be more important to that is actually to give that out to everybody that I come in contact with. And then you can ask it again. If I was giving that out to everybody that I came in contact, what would be even more important than that? And a lot of your readers come from that, or your audience comes from that position of faith. And this is where you get into that really high level of going, if I was giving out, love to everyone that I see, what would be more important to that? It might be, connection to God. And that might be that highest thing. So you can take that feeling of not feeling enough or a behavior that you dislike, you can ask it, what is the job that it's doing? How is it basically keeping me safe? What have I hired it to do? If you want to use that language, then you can ask that question. If I was completely and totally, whatever your answer is, what is more important than that? Very quickly, you can get to a lot higher intent and a lot higher part of yourself. And then you can bring that back down the ladder. So you can go, if I was totally 100% connected to God, how would that change how I gave love to the people around me? And then if I was totally and 100%, connected to God, giving love out, how would that change how I felt loved myself? And you can bring it all the way back into that feeling of not feeling enough. And you can go, what changed? How does that feel differently? And it's interesting, if you want to take this kind of to the next level, you can actually pull this back into your past and push it into your future. So you can go, what if I was actually operating at the highest intent, the highest version of myself from when I was born? What would that look like? How would that change how I view my past? And you can bring it all the way up into the present, and you can push it all the way out into the future, however far you want to do. So a very simple exercise where we typically take our emotions and we repress them or like treat them as something that's not significant. We can connect to a very high level with what's really important to us, and then use that to basically reset around that whenever we feel that certain emotion. We can use it as a trigger for a very positive thing rather than sometimes a negative thing.
Man, there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah. I love that. You can go so deep on that. There's a couple things that I guess was crossing, I was hearing through that, the thought of feeling enough. Where is the balance, or how do you balance of always trying to grow to get better? Right? So when I hear the word enough, it's like, okay, now I'm done. But in my life, I always want to continue to get better every day. But I never want to say I'm not enough. So there's got to be a balance there, right?
Mm-hmm. It's an excellent question. And the way that I classify this is you have basically like your core enoughness. And then I would say outside of that, you have logistical enoughness. Like there's a logistical enoughness that, let's say you have employees for your business. You need to make a certain amount of money to make payroll. Like there's enough. There's a very clear value of going, this is enough to make payroll, right? So it's a logistical enoughness. But what we do is we take those let's say you didn't make payroll. Then you go, I am not enough as an entrepreneur. I'm not enough as a person. So we translate something that's like a failure or a learning experience or whatever we want to classify that. And we translate that into our core enoughness. Mm-hmm. We go, I'm not enough as a father. Let's say I like snap at my kids. Like I'm tired or whatever. I just like go off on them. And then now I translate that to a core in not enoughness and go, I'm not enough as a father. that's where you have to keep those things separate. And there's different things that you could do to do this, but it takes practice to basically keep that separate. But even that distinction in your mind. And what I say too, in terms of that, I'm always trying to grow and always trying to learn. But, and I forget who I got the phrase from, but somebody said, like, I want to be fully satisfied and ravenously hungry. So it's like, how can I live in this moment right here, fully satisfied, and go like, whatever is happening, however much money I have, whatever my relationships are right now, whatever my health is right now, like it's enough. Like I am satisfied with this moment, but at the same time, I'm always trying to grow and get better. So there definitely is a tension there. And it's something that I've wondered at a lot too. I even describe it as, I was talking with somebody the other day, like, what if an 8 is actually a 10 out of 10? Cause I'm always trying to get like a 10 out of 10, but then you always have this, you're setting yourself for an infinitely losing game where you're always measuring, how can I get to this perfect standard that's always farther away from you? Mm-hmm. But what if I go, an 8 is actually a 10 out of 10? And especially with all the stuff that happened with COVID and life and whatever, sometimes that's actually a more balanced way to approach things. So that would be my answer to
I like that.
Question.
I coach with people on the health aspect of the pillars. And that's one of the lines I use a lot is we shoot for a 10, but be totally satisfied with an 8.
If you can do an 8 consistently, and this is in any area, I mean, your Pareto law, right? Your 80-20 principle, like pretty much in any area of your life, if you can consistently do an 8, you'll be better than, probably say 95% of the people.
That's what I tried to tell my parents when I was in school. Yeah. Really, B's are good.
Yeah.
Lighten up.
Perfect.
The difference is my parents would have been ecstatic if I brought home beans. So
I remember that with a buddy of mine who's always striving for his 4.0, and he came home and he was like, man, I can't believe it. I'm so pissed. I got my first B. I'm like, my parents were ecstatic. I got my first B.
Right. That's so true.
Absolutely.
So true. Well, that was so much to unpack there, but such a good tip for all of the dads out there that are trying to just figure all this out. So it sounds like to get through where you are today, there was a journey there, right? This entrepreneur journey of, sitting in the car in tears. And dads, I ask you to reflect on that right now, because how many of us have been there? Right? Because especially as the entrepreneur and starting a newer family, right? With, we're pregnant now, there's not only your spouse relying on you, it's now your kids, like you're responsible to keep that thing alive, right? There's a lot that weighs on that. And it can be scary. But, what we've been really realizing as we talk to more and more entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial dads out there, it's, what would the world be like if we didn't take that risk? Right? What would it be like if the entrepreneurs, the creators out there, the rule makers didn't go take that? So and I guess I'm saying this because the stress you're going through right now, for all the dads out there that are in business, either starting the business, trying to keep their business going on, shifting their business, right? Because we are going through an economic shift. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's just different, right? We're going through this, and it can be scary. Yet keep the faith and keep going on, because look what comes out of it. So I love that. And then fully satisfied, yet always hungry. You didn't use the word always, but I like that one. Fully satisfied in the moment, yet always hungry. Love that. So, Michael, it sounds like you're a wealth of knowledge, and you're coaching other dads. So what is kind of your passion project right now that you're working on for, to get your business where you want it to go? What are you working on these days?
Well, I actually have. So, every year I launch a 12-week mastermind course. So it starts right after the time change, because I'm in China and the time change is just not fun for people all the way around the world, changing times. But right after the time change, so March 13th, I have a 12-week program that actually really in-depth dives into some of this mindset stuff, the emotion stuff, and how can we really truly feel enough, and how can we basically train ourselves? Because all of this stuff is like trainable skills. A lot of times we just don't know how to train it, or we don't know that we can train it. So how can I take myself to train, first off, defining what do I actually really want? What do I want in these 6 different pillars? What would that look like? How would that align with my values? Discovering kind of what that looks like and what that, the realities of that. And then going, how can I train myself to operate from that, the most aligned with my values and my purpose as much as I possibly can? And what does that look like? So I have everything from, I have a podcast called Success Engineering, and I've had, elite special forces on there, and they talk about how they handle fear. So in all the chaos and the craziness of everything that's going on, how do these special forces handle fear? And it's a trainable skill, right? Anxiety and stress. So it's like you can learn that, and I cover some of those things in my mastermind course. And then relationships, like any of these kind of things, you can take these pillars and go, how can I train myself to show up how I want to be in as many situations as possible, as often as possible, basically.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, so you were bringing up the special forces about how you interviewed them and how they get through fear, through their emotions and feelings and things like that, which makes so much sense, because to handle fear, or I would say to handle emotion and all of it, you have to be just aware of the emotion, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what you're getting to. It's so powerful. So, man, it's kind of a little still unpacking everything you said here. So let's just back up. How did you get to China through this journey? I'm
from
crying in the car, trying to make it as an
car.
online trainer, to now in China, and also building a business while you're there, and probably a really hard time to live in China.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah. So I cried in my car here, and, me and my wife are just really struggling. And my wife just goes, well, like if we're looking for jobs and stuff anyway, she was an art teacher. So she's like, why don't we, look overseas? So a little bit more background on me. I actually grew up in Papua New Guinea. So I was born there, grew up my whole life over there. Then I came back to the US. My wife was born in Turkey, and then she grew up her whole life over there. So then we were in Indiana, of all places, not exactly the cultural hub of the world.
Similar. Very similar.
So we were like, we wanted to experience different cultures and different, people and languages and stuff again. And so she started looking at international jobs and ended up, getting one in Shanghai. And we're like, well, what's the worst that could happen? We go over there, it's terrible, and we come back, and then we just find a job, anyway. And it actually was the best decision for our family. Really changed anything. And then that allowed me to start growing, what I'm doing. This is, I don't know, 6 years ago or something at this point, but it allowed me to start growing, what I'm doing with entrepreneurs. And then I've been able to build that from that point.
Wow. So there's something there that's come up with previous entrepreneurs who we've spoken to. It's that entrepreneur's mindset. Now, at that point, you weren't even necessarily thinking you're an entrepreneur. You're just going somewhere. But that what's the worst that can happen? If it sucks, we just move back and get jobs. An entrepreneur thinks that same way. Yeah, I'm going to quit my job and open this dry cleaner. If it doesn't work out, I'll just get a job. But,
exactly.
The rest of, 90% of the people are like, oh, no way in hell. I can't know that is such a limiting belief. Like, I can't do that. I can't do that. But we've had other entrepreneurs that said the same things, like, what's the worst that can happen? I'll just get a job if it doesn't work out. And you're the same way. Yeah, we'll go to China. If it doesn't work out, we'll move home and get jobs.
We'll come back. Yeah.
It's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So how, one of the questions we ask, entrepreneurs that have went through the journey, which it sounds like you have, is, and you kind of mentioned it before, that time in the car, but there's been times where you're out of balance, right? Because you're paying it, you're too focused on the business, or you're too focused on this, or you're too focused on this. What is a tip or trick that you have for the dads out there that you would say how to get back to making sure your priorities are in line? How to make sure you're balanced in that, if balance exists?
Have good friends before you need them. Like that during that period of time, our good friends got us through it. We had people that I still consider family that believed in me and my wife when we couldn't see any belief in ourselves. And I would really, that is by far, you look at all the research on happiness, all the research and, all of that. and it is the quality of the relationships that you have. So sometimes a lot of times I would say you need somebody else to be there. So develop a relationship where you can be honest and vulnerable enough that you can let them know that you're not doing well, and you can have somebody to actually help you out. That would be my biggest tip to say about how to get centered. There's tons of other things, reconnecting with yourself, being aware, meditating, all that kind of stuff. But I would say having friends is so important.
And I love that. We talk about that so much because at the Balanced Business Dad, we have what's called the Dad Up Council, which so much of that council is the brotherhood around it, right? Mm-hmm. It's, we have retreats, we have coaching calls 7 times a month, yet it's that brotherhood where you can rely on that other people and just be open. Because how many people, you talked about the dads and the men out there really not leaning on their feelings too much, right? So how many of us have been there where we don't say what we need to say to anyone? Mm-hmm. And that's what, we've done here with the Balanced Business Dad and the Dad Up Council is we allow that. And so I couldn't agree with that more, is make sure you have those people in your lives. Make sure you utilize the brotherhood. We put that as the Dad Up framework. To lean on them, but they can also call you out when you need to be called out on. Like, hey, you're kind of screwing up there, buddy. Let's get back on track. And that is, some people take that well, some people don't. I'm one of those people that the people I've placed in my life purposefully, or God has placed in my life purposefully, when they call me out, I listen. So I love that. I could not agree more. That's the best way to come back to center.
There's a really cool tool. I use it. I recommend it for, everyone. It's an app called Be a Looper. And it was developed by this crazy tech lady out of Australia. But essentially what it is, it's really interesting. Very, very simple. You basically connect with, 3 to 5 of the people that mean the most to you. And every day it has a little pop-up at 4:00 in the afternoon that just goes, you're ranking your day, how it went on a scale of like 1 to 10. And you can rank it in a couple different categories. You could just do an overall, like, I was a 5, out of 10 today. And basically you see these little, bouncing dots that bob around. And those are the 4 other people that you have basically connected with and given them access to this. But it prompts, like if it's a 3 or below, it prompts the people in that circle to reach out in some form to you and go like, hey, I just noticed that you're not doing too well today. What does that look like? And I found it so helpful. One, because again, like we talked about, talking about the feelings is a little bit challenging, but it's easier to just have that number. Sometimes you just go like, I'm a 4, right? I'm a 7. And sometimes you dive into it deeper than that. Sometimes you don't, but having that, and then if it does go low, having that automatic thing that kind of prompts the people close to you to reach out is huge. I use it every day with the people that are close to me.
I love that.
That's pretty cool.
And I think, we're going to look into that, because how can we utilize that through our whole brotherhood? Because we have the Council of Men for that. I love that. So that's perfect. Awesome. Well, Michael, we cannot appreciate this more. You mentioned earlier you kind of have this mastermind starting out. Tell us a little bit more about that if anybody's interested in that, because I believe that's going to be starting a week after this podcast is released. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So March 13th, I have a 12-week mastermind primarily for entrepreneurs that looks at, one, how do we define success in these different areas? Like if we don't intentionally define it, we just revert to the definition of the culture or the societal group that we're in around us. So how do we intentionally define what would success look and feel like with my health, with my mind, with my emotions, with my relationships? What does that look like? What are the areas that I really need to focus on potentially? And then we break it down and go, because all of these mindset skills, they're trainable. So we can train ourselves to be more aware. We can train ourselves to put more space between our stimulus, whatever that is, whatever story we tell ourselves and the response that we have, whatever emotion that we charge that story with. We can actually train all of these things. So through that 12 weeks, we work down through training these mindset skills of going, how can I show up? Basically, essence is, how can I show up the most aligned, like in alignment with my core values, the highest percentage of the time. Basically, how can I train myself to do that? So that's what it looks like. And then you can use the same skills in the areas of your health, in the areas of your relationship, in those different pillars, but it's training yourself to show up from your highest self the maximum amount of time.
Excellent. How can people find out more about that mastermind?
Yeah, so they can go to my website. It's successengineering.org. And they can, click, I'll have this stuff up by then, obviously. And so they can click, they can look at it, see what it entails, and have a great group of people that do that. So,
and that's your podcast also, right? Success Engineering.
Yeah, I do have a podcast. So I interview everybody from like multimillionaire CEOs to, I've had like Daniel Pink, people like neuroscientists, Broadway directors, to kind of the same idea, to peer back, peer behind that curtain of success where it looks all glamorous on the outside and go, what were the fears? What were the lonelinesses that you went through? Where did you, doubt yourself, and how did you overcome that? And then basically looking at how they defined success and created it in their life. So Success Engineering for the podcast.
That's cool.
Awesome. Well, guys, this was a phenomenal episode. I know I took a lot of notes and stuff I have to unpack for my life, and I'm sure you guys do as well. So again, thank you, Michael. We have a lot of things happening in 2023 with the Balanced Business Dad. A couple of them is going to be one that we've been talking about, but that's the Dad Up Council. So you can go to the dadupcouncil.com. And you can read a little bit more about that, listen to what other people are saying, but it's that brotherhood that we talk about, right? So if you want to, that help with leaning in your health, or that help with leaning in your business or your marriage, et cetera, we have specially trained coaches around each one of those pillars that we can lean into. I know me personally, I became a better husband and a better father just by being a part of those calls. So we invite you to that. You can go to dadupcouncil.com. We also have the first weekend of May. It's going to be the second Balanced Business Dad retreat in beautiful Lesterville, Missouri. That is, we have to cap that off to 30 dads because it is at a campground. So we only have a certain amount of cabins. So be on the lookout for that. Guys, again, thank you so much. RJ, let's close this out.
Yeah. So as we always say, dads, guys, thank you so much for listening. This podcast we put out for you, and to help us out, the one thing we'd ask is give us a rating, give us a review, go on to Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast and give us a review. Definitely rate it, and that just helps us get this out to all the other dads who are enjoying this great information, like these conversation with Michael. That was fantastic. Dustin mentioned the Dad Up Council. We also have a public Facebook group that is the Balanced Business Dad. So if you go onto Facebook, just search the Balanced Business Dad, you'll get to that group. We'll invite you in, and we have, I think at this point, 300 plus dads that are sharing their wins and successes and doing life together in that group, and it's pretty cool.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. We'll see you on the next episode. And again, thank you, Michael. And guys, check out his website. Check out that mastermind. It sounds pretty awesome.